Hello and welcome to Quilting with Lori. My name is Lori Dickman. Today I have a quick little project for those of you who have larger squares in your scrap stash and you're not really sure what to do with them. I have a fun little pattern that I think you'll enjoy, and it will help you to use up those large squares from your scrap stash. Here is a quick glance at the quilt that I'm working on. It is an improv quilt, actually, something very fast and very easy. And I'm calling it the 3-cut shuffle. And we'll be using 4 squares, and we're going to make 3 cuts on these 4 squares. And we'll end up with some beautiful blocks. Everyone can be different. Let's see how this is done. For this Scrappy improv quilt, you can use any size large square that you want. You can start out with 7-inch squares, 8-inch squares, 8.5-inch squares, 9-inch squares, whatever you choose. I actually started out with the 8-inch squares, and you'll see here that I have pulled 4 different squares. There are a variety of patterns within this little set that I've pulled. And what I'm going to do is line up each of them perfectly even. And you can also identify when you line these up if maybe your squares are not perfectly square. You can make sure you fix that. I'm going to put that light one on the bottom because it's hard to see on the white mat. All right, so these are my 4 squares. They're lined up. Got a little bit of extra grain over here, which is going to be fine. So what I'm going to do is use my Omni Grid and my rotary cutter, and I'm simply going to make 3 cuts any way I want to along the square here. And you could actually make more cuts if you choose. I'm just doing 3 cuts. All right, so as you can see here, whoops, I didn't press hard enough here. I'm not standing right over the top of it as I should be. There we go. Okay, I still didn't get it. One more time. All right, there we go. So there are the 3 cuts on the 4 squares, and I'm simply going to shuffle them now. That's where it gets that 3-cut shuffle name. I've taken the top square and I put it on the bottom. Now I'm going to take the top 2 squares and put them on the bottom. Now I'm going to take the top 3 squares and put them on the bottom. And I'm going to leave this one as is. So now I've got all 4 of the fabrics showing here. I'm going to piece all of them together, and each of the 4 blocks will be completely different. It'll be a nice scrappy version of this block. I believe in that last clip, I called each of these squares. They're obviously not squares. They're just elements of this square. So now what we're going to do is start piecing them together. And this is where you do have to be very careful so that you're not accidentally turning them cattywampus and creating something other than the square that you want as an end result. So I'm going to take these first 2 right here, and I'm going to just line up those edges, and I'm going to sew a 1/4 of an inch here, and then I'm going to push this over. Then I'm going to take the next 2, and I am going to sew a 1/4 of an inch there. And then when you put those 2 units back together, I'm going to show you here in a moment, but we got to make sure that we're putting them together so they actually create the square correctly. Let me show you how that's done. So I have sewn these 2, and I've just finger pressed them for you here right now. But what we want to make sure that we do is that we put them back together correctly. And if you look at this, if I were to try to sew that together, I am creating more of a tumbler shape, not a square shape. So I need to make sure that I flip this around. That is going to create, it's actually going to create a rectangle at this point, and it will get squared up later. We have removed 3, or actually a lot of seam allowances within this block. So therefore, the square that it originally was is turning into more of a rectangle at this point, but we are going to trim it down to be a square here soon. Or if you don't want to, you can leave them as rectangles as well. So I've finished piecing one of the blocks that will go in the quilt. You could leave this as a rectangle if you choose to. I did not. I wanted mine to all be squares. So I am going to use a 6.5-inch OmniGrid ruler and square this up. I'll just be cutting off about an inch, maybe an inch and a half off the longer end here. But you could certainly keep them as rectangles and use them that way. I've just merely finger pressed them. But back to putting these together correctly, what's really important is that you just compare the blocks to the layout here. And you'll see that this red one matches this green shape. This green shape matches that white shape. This white shape matches that pink shape. And this burgundy shape matches this pink shape. So you do, in that way, you're able to clarify that, yes, I have put this together properly. Now I can go on to the next one and continue piecing them together, just like that, until you have all 4 of those squares done. I recommend doing the 4 squares by themselves and then cutting or doing the rest of them. You might want to cut them all at once. That would save you some time. But I don't think I'd piece them all at one time. Unless, of course, you'd like to really mix it up. That would be great. Then each and every block would absolutely be completely different. Once you have sewn all of your blocks together, then if you choose to square them up and make them squares, you can certainly do so at this time. If you want to keep them rectangles, I still would square them up nicely because these ends are a little cattywampus. They're not even at all, so they need to be squared up nicely. So you would want to at least do that. But I did choose to make mine squares. And what you're going to want to do, if that's what you choose to do with yours, is identify what size would be the largest that all of your squares can be, that you can cut them down. And mine is 6.5 inches. So I'm using my 6.5 OmniGrid. And I'm simply going to get rid of some of this excess here. I'm going to flip it around. And what I'm doing with this excess on this side, whoops, I moved. This is going to be crumb quilting pieces. So I've got a lot of these excess pieces and they're all going into my crumb stash. So I'm going to square all of these up. As you can see here, I've got this piece here. It's going to go in my crumb stash, and I will make crumb blocks from it. But at this point, I have some 6.5-inch squares that I can add to my quilt. Here you can see a portion of my quilt that I've pieced together so far. You'll see that I have sashing in between each block, and I have sashing rows in between each row there. So I've cut mine from white fabric. You can make it black or navy or red or gray, whatever you choose. If you choose to use sashing, maybe you would rather just sew your blocks together and have it completely scrappy that way. I do like how the white or any uniform color in the sashing just gives your eye a resting place. So I chose to do that. I cut these into 1.5-inch wide strips, subcut them into 6.5-inch long strips so they would get sewn nicely between the blocks themselves. And then if yours are rectangles, then you're of course just going to need to measure what size your rectangles are and how you're going to throw them together, and then measure your sashing accordingly. What I did when I put this together, I laid it out on the floor upstairs by my sewing machine, and I chose to lay my squares. I indicated this was the top here, but I chose to lay them out so that one block was up and down, one vertical, horizontal, vertical, horizontal. So that's how I chose to put mine together, so it was really scrappy, and then I will sew them together with the 6.5-inch long sashing. And that's how they'll go together. And then, of course, there will be a white sashing row in between each of the scrappy block rows. This is just a great, fast way to make an improv quilt using the larger blocks that you might have in your stash. And maybe you're not sure what to do with them, but this is a great way to use them up. I hope you've enjoyed today as I've shared with you how to put this scrappy improv quilt together. I'm calling it a 3-cut shuffle. And I'd love to see your quilts that you're putting together using this pattern. Don't forget to post them out on my Facebook group page, Quilting with Lori, Scrap Up Your Stash, and I'll have a link below. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed the content that I'm providing here on my channel. If you do, please don't forget to like and subscribe. That really does help my channel to get out to more quilters just like yourself. Thank you so much and have a great week. Happy quilting.